Welcome to Reddit After Hours. This is r/PettyRevenge, where OP's 5-year-old daughter stands up to her autistic little brother's bully in the most hilarious way. Our first Reddit post comes from Bajunga Dustin, titled, "Guy tried to scam me in Rome, so I threw his scam product in an inconvenient location." When I was in Rome, we had read about all of these scams that people try to do. One of which was trying to give you free stuff but guilt tripping you into giving them something in return, which was usually money. At one point, this actually happened. My whole group, who I had informed about these scams, fell for it. I declined, though, to take the bracelet. Basically, guy comes up, asks where we are from. When you tell him where you're from, he makes some random connection between there and where he is from and claims that you guys are basically family. Then they offer to give you something, quote, from his family, and then ties a bracelet on your arm, which are kind of hard to get off. Then he asks you if you have anything for his family, holding out his hand. My son then proceeded to hand this man $20. I wasn't too upset. It is what it is. He was fine with it, so this really wasn't an issue for me. This was just me having seen the scam in process, and now I was aware of how it worked in more detail. Also, we found these identical bracelets at a small shop about 10 minutes later for about 30 US cents. Now, on to the petty part of this story. So, the next day, I'm by myself walking by the Coliseum, and one of these guys asks me where I'm from. Knowing that he's going to try and make some connection, I say that I'm from the moon. He's caught off guard for a bit, but continues his pitch anyway. I tell him that I'm not interested, but he stays nagging me. I tell him over and over that I'm not interested, but he just keeps harassing me. So finally, I stop and I'm like, it is what it is. He says, I want to give you something from my family to yours, bro. That's it. I say, for free? And he says, yeah, free, from my family to yours. And so I'm feeling petty because he's been harassing me this entire time. So I take the bracelet and I say thanks and immediately turn and abruptly start walking. He dashes to catch up to me and is like, yo, bro, you got anything for my family? And I say, no, man, sorry, and continue walking. He then grabs me by my shoulder, looks me dead in the eye, and says, give it back. And I'm like, what? He says, give it back. Again, in a more stern tone. The sales pitch nice guy voice is no more. So I said, what, this bracelet? Which I was now holding in my hand and not actually wearing, and he holds out his hand. I say, this is mine. You gave it to me. He said, no, it's not free. I then reminded him that he specifically said, quote, free from his family. He then tries to cut me off, and as I'm about to cross the street, he starts swearing at me. So I take his bracelet and I huck it down a 20-foot drop to the ground level of the area outside of the Coliseum. He could still go get it if he wanted to, but he would have to walk all the way around the ramp and far away from me. He then starts swearing at me and screaming F you over and over. He then hawks like he's gonna spit on me, and I tell him that that is a very, very bad idea. Finally, he turns and walks away. OP, yeah, I've read a lot about those scammers too. I've read that they can be really pushy and really scammy. I love this one comment in the comment section that says, you said that you're from the moon. You should have given him a pebble off the ground and called it a moon rock from your family to his. Unfortunately, I can't really say the next Redditor's username because it's all swear words and YouTube doesn't like that. But our next Reddit post is titled, I got revenge on my stepdad for selling my dead grandmother's jade pendant necklace. I, a 23-year-old female, lost my grandmother due to COVID complications in January of 2022. I bought my grandmother a jade necklace pendant and bought myself a rose quartz pendant. Her necklace cost about $200. This was because it was wrapped in real gold and it was a huge piece of jade. My mother's husband, my stepdad, treated my grandmother and I horribly. He abused me for years and treated my grandmother like a slave. My grandmother raised all of my siblings and I, and my youngest half-brother on my mom's side is my stepdad's son. Not even 24 hours after her death, my narcissistic mother told me that she would go through her room at the end of the week. Not even 24 hours later after that, her room was completely cleared. I then noticed a fat wad of cash in my stepfather's hands. I asked my stepfather if I could have my grandmother's jade pendant back. It was very important to me because it was hers and she wore it all the time. My stepdad told me that he sold it because, quote, everything in her room was now his. I was infuriated. I have never felt that kind of rage before. The following day, I plotted my revenge. While my mother and her husband were gone away, I got busy. Now, for context, my mother and her husband really depended on me a lot while living with them. I took his brand new laptop that he bought from selling my dead grandmother's jade pendant and I filled the bathtub up with water. I dropped it in the water and I left it there for a good 10 minutes. I took his laptop charger and I cut a small hole that he couldn't even see in it. I also made sure to dry the laptop off really well and put everything back where it belonged. I then went even further. I took everything that I bought in the kitchen and donated it to people who really needed it. The air fryer that I bought, donated. The microwave that I bought, donated. The plates, bowls, cups, all donated. The pantry cabinet that I had bought, donated. I then took it up a notch further. I took all the toiletries that I had bought with my money out of the bathroom and locked them in a lockbox. You sell my dead grandmother's pendant, no more laptop, no more anything that I bought. The icing on the cake, I had proof of purchase of my dead grandmother's pendant. I made his workplace aware that he was a thief. Then OP adds a little edit. I moved out in May of 2022 and I've been no contact with both of them for a very long time. OP, how careless of a mother do you have to be to not even, like, your mom died and, like, presumably, right, like, you didn't say that they have, like, a terrible relationship or anything, but, like, you just sell every single thing that she had in less than 48 hours and get rid of everything and not even offer the grandchildren a single sentimental piece of anything to remember her by? That's terrible. And this stepdad sounds like an even bigger butthole. You were right to go no contact with them, OP. They sound like complete trash. Our next Reddit post is from ICH215, titled, Hurt My Brother? You'll see what it feels like. So, this story happened in September of 2005. Our son Tom, who was 3 at the time, had been diagnosed on the autism spectrum about 9 months prior to this. Tom would engage with his sister, Ellie, who was 5 at the time, but would typically not make an effort to engage with other children. He also had a significant speech delay. While our kids are 2 years apart, our daughter takes after me. I'm 5'3", and our son takes after my husband, who's about 6 feet tall. We would frequently be asked if our kids were twins because they were so close in height, despite the age difference. Our family had been invited to a birthday party for twin 1-year-olds. There were a lot of people at the party that I had known growing up, but hadn't seen in years. Most of them had brought their young children as well. Our kids were having a great time jumping around in the inflatable bounce house. Given the age of our children and our son's diagnosis, we had to keep eyes on them at all times. A little boy, I'll call him Mark for the sake of this story, that I didn't know ran up to our son and knocked him down. Mark looked about 3 or 4 at the time, maybe. Tom had not interacted with Mark in any way prior to this. The child then ran away laughing. Our daughter helped Tom get up and then brought him over to us to make sure that he was okay. Ellie was super protective of her younger brother and wanted to push Mark down back. I told her that it was probably an accident and the kids went back to jumping around. Well, a couple of minutes later, Mark pushed Tom down again. After pushing Tom down, Mark ran over to a couple who I assumed were his parents. Ellie brought Tom over to us again and she was now furious. She really wanted to push Mark down. I told her no, that I would speak to his parents instead. I recognized Mark's father and I made my way over. I said hello and I made some small chit-chat and then asked to tell his son not to push our son down. He said that he would take care of it. The kids then resumed playing. Mark then pushed Tom down a 3rd time. Ellie went up to Mark and told him to stop pushing her brother. Mark responded with, "I don't have to listen to you." We were all furious at this point, and Tom was getting really upset. He didn't understand why this child kept pushing him down. Ellie asked a third time to push Mark down. We finally gave her permission to. She sprinted across the bounce house and tackled Mark. When they both stood up, she pushed him down again, saying, "Stay away from my little brother." Mark then began to cry and made his way over to his parents. His dad looked over at me, and I just gave him the "oh well" look, and Mark left the bounce house. We avoided their family for the rest of the party. OP, gold star for Ellie. If I were you, on the way home, I would have bought her any ice cream or toy that she wanted as a reward for sticking up for her little brother. On the flip side of that, if Mark was my son, I would have really dug into him and told him that bullying in no circumstance is okay. And then to make it even worse, if you had told the parents that, your kid was on the spectrum and diagnosed as autistic, I would have embarrassed my son so much and yelled at him in front of everyone so badly that he would have always remembered that you especially do not pick on people that are, disabled, handicapped, whatever, that might not be able to defend themselves, as well as others. Bullying, is terrible in any case. Doesn't matter if you're, not disabled or whatever. Bullying is still terrible. But it's a completely other level of terrible to knowingly pick on a disabled kid. And I would have embarrassed the crap out of my child if he ever even dared try to do something like that. Our next Reddit post is from Undercover Pretzel, titled, "A customer screamed at me once, so now I eat his favorite food." When I was a university student, I worked at a little supermarket for over a year. I was 19 at the time, and since in UK the minimum wages are age-based, I was making very, very little. We had a really complicated machine for printing and cashing lottery tickets, and any corrections and refunds had to be signed off by the manager, who, of course, was never around when we needed him. Cashing one ticket alone took something like 15 steps. It was wild. So, for the first few weeks, I was quite slow at it in order to try to not make any mistakes. Well, on my second day there, an old guy turned up and, in addition to some food, he wanted a few lottery tickets. He didn't seem to appreciate my lack of speed and leaned in about 8 inches away from my face to scream "yes" when I tried to check if the numbers that I was about to print off were correct. In retrospect, it really wasn't that big of a deal, but I was young and very small, so his screaming and towering over me was enough to make me feel upset and afraid. He looked very pleased with himself for making the young girl earning a few pounds an hour tremble with fear. Now, I've already had a bit of customer service and retail experience under my belt from a prior job, but that day I cried in the employee bathrooms for the very first time. Now, this job was really not great, so I was brought to tears by customers a few more times during my time there. But I was broke and I was a fast learner, so I was always available for overtime. I actually ended up working 45 to 55-hour weeks, and I quickly found out that this guy was a regular, which meant that he had absolutely known that I was brand new and that I got to serve him very often over the next year or so. I also got the hang of things pretty quickly though, and did pretty much everything else there, from training others, keeping the refrigerator's temperatures logged, ordering stock, logging and clearing waste like expired items and those with a broken seal, to reducing items which had reached their sell-by date, 25% off at 9 a.m., 50% off at noon, and finally 75% off at 4 p.m. One benefit was that I learned a few things about the jerk who had screamed at me, like how he was nasty to everyone working there, especially the younger ladies, how he was retired and seemingly not very well off, and how he appeared to keep track of food sell-by dates and would regularly turn up after certain meat-based items had been reduced for the final time. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with being old or on a budget, but it's always a bad idea to scream at people just because you're having a bad day and they're not allowed to defend themselves, especially the ones who handle your food. The other benefit was that because I was working there full time, I was the one serving him 99% of the time, which gave me ample opportunity to deliver my petty revenge. and it was going to be a slow burn, like cooking a frog, as they say. Being a broke university student, I figured that I could both stick it to him and save a little bit of money, since food price reductions also stacked with my employee discount. He actually never screamed at me again, but for the next 10 months, I hid all of his nearly expired favorites behind the dairy items and purchased them myself once he had left in a huff after finding them all gone. I actually didn't even care for sausages all that much, but I regularly ate something called toad in a hole out of sheer spite. And as a benefit, the vile jerk probably managed to only buy reduced sausages maybe 5 times in that 10 months. He got visibly more and more upset because other shoppers had seemingly caught on to his strategy. I always nodded sympathetically and said, "Sorry, we've sold the last ones. Maybe try again in a week." I actually rather like Toad in a Hole now, and I have it as a special revenge treat now. It reminds me of that time that I cooked a frog, aka the jerk, for nearly a year. Moral of the story, don't scream at the people who handle your food. OP, on top of that being slow and petty, that was also very economic for you. If I was a broke college student, I would absolutely have done the same thing. Good for you, OP. And that guy sounds like a total jerk. And, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being old and on a budget. I kind of feel for the guy there. But that doesn't give him an excuse to be a jerk to people who can't defend themselves. A lot of the people that walk into these retail places and are complete jerks to you are jerks to you knowing that you can't say anything back, and that if you could say anything back, you absolutely would not take their BS, and they probably wouldn't treat you that way. So good for you, OP. He absolutely deserved to spend whatever extra money he was forced to for being a jerk to you guys. And then, for anyone listening and not actually watching, I included a picture of what Toad in a Hole looks like. Imagine you have a pan full of bread and you've just stuck a bunch of sausages to bake into the bread as the bread rises, and that's Toad in the Hole. It looks kind of strange, but I don't know, maybe good. That was Reddit After Hours, bringing you r/PettyRevenge. Thank you all so much for listening, and if you like these stories, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below for any future Reddit subs that you'd like us to cover in the future, as we put out new Reddit videos almost every single day.